everyone. Thank you again for joining us at the 2018 Northeast Seafood Expo. Joining us today is Bob Miles, President, Founder of Martec Industries. Bob, thank you so much for appearing on a podcast.
You're welcome. Let's see where this leads and see what goes.
Sure. So, Bob, I've known you for quite a few years. You've always been a forward-thinking kind of business owner and in the industry. How many years have you been in Costa Rica?
We've been in Costa Rica 40 years, and about 37 years ago built a fishing boat and went fishing, and one thing led to another, and currently we have 300 employees, revenue of about $30 million, and our latest thing is we've started a snapper farm, probably the largest scale snapper farm in the world.
That's fantastic.
And we're always trying to be out there on the edge and doing new things.
Sure. So you're doing farm snapper and you're doing wild caught species as well.
Yeah, the snapper currently is about 20% of our business. 80% is still swordfish, tuna, mahi, wild snapper, wild grouper. That's our main business, our core business.
Sure. So 37 years in the industry, in the seafood industry. Where was sustainability 37 years ago? Was it a topic that was talked about here in the States in your experience?
Sustainability probably was more talked about on the fishing level of how long is a mahi resource going to last and what type of boat do you build and what the future is, especially when the fishery started leveling off. Sustainability, excuse me, is just coming in the last couple years into Costa Rica consciousness.
Okay, all right. And
much more so in the fish farm.
Sure.
The fish farm sustainability and traceability is much easier than it is in the wild fishery.
Sure.
So we're taking advantage of that right away.
What was the the past few years Costa Rica's kind of getting on board with the mindset of sustainability?
We have FIPs working in tuna, swordfish, and mahi right now.
Okay.
It's a long course to take, but little by little it's going. We have some of our markets are helping funding it, which is forward thinking. So
that's fantastic
because Costa Rica is a small place and there's only very few players, and so it's quite expensive to do these things.
Well, and Costa Rica has been known just from the basic standpoint from a travel destination for ecotourism and natural and maintaining their natural habitats and not overpopulating, overbuilding over the past years. So sustainability kind of falls right in line with that. Has the commercial fishing industry in Costa Rica been receptive to sustainability initiatives in your experience?
By being a fisherman, sustainability, when you put vessel locating devices on their boats, and they're usually not very receptive to those ideas.
Okay.
But little by little it's coming around. I think it's going to be price driven if you do the right things and bring in good fish and it's traceable and you make more money on that fish than anybody would fall in line with that.
Sure, absolutely.
So I think that'll probably drive the sustainability and traceability.
And it guarantees the fishery stocks for years to come for the next generation of fishermen.
Yeah, you have to remember though that Costa Rica is a small country and it's next between Nicaragua and Panama and Ecuador, and the fish swim from country to country. So if Costa Rica fully gets behind a sustainability project and a FIP and these other things, in Panama and Nicaragua doesn't do that, then Costa Rica spends a lot of money and gets virtually nothing out of it. So it has to be a Central American-wide subject, or it won't work.
It won't work.
Yeah.
And is that moving forward to get these other countries on board?
Somewhat. Fishermen being very independent and hard to organize.
Sure.
And then organizing 3 or 4 countries on top of that, it's quite a mountain to climb.
Do you feel that other companies that are resourcing product from those other countries, Nicaragua and Ecuador, should force those other fishing companies to move the sustainability initiatives faster and further?
That probably will be the main driver. The consumer says you have to have this. It's happening right now in our fish farm where we have to have best aquaculture practice, and it's being brought on more by the consumer than the fisherman voluntarily putting his hand up and say he wants to be sustainable.
Absolutely. What's your so? You look at sustainability, it wasn't really talked about 37 years ago when you got into the business. It's, the past few years in Costa Rica, it's come to the forefront. Do you feel that through collaboration and other companies working together, those initiatives can be met and realized faster and quicker?
Yeah, and also the government has to fall in line. For instance, they want to put size limits on snapper and grouper, and the fishermen are fighting it, and the law comes into effect, and the government will not put the enforcement measures in to go on board a vessel and see that they might have too small snappers, and so it becomes quite complicated. The government of Costa Rica says, yeah, we want to do this. The consumer says, yeah, we want to have sustainable snapper, but then the fishermen find a market for that illegal snapper, and it's not enforced by the government, and the whole thing falls apart. The whole thing falls apart.
Yeah. So more intervention by the government, more more enforcement of fishery improvement projects, basically.
How can you put pressure not only on the fishermen from the consumer side, but also on the government of Costa Rica?
Absolutely. No, it's got to be a loop that's closed. Everything has to, all the I's have to be dotted and the T's crossed.
Absolutely.
There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Do you feel that there's greater awareness in a consumer base in Costa Rica of sustainability versus what was there today, or do they not think about it, or do you think it's half and half?
In the marketplace, you're saying? The marketplace?
Yeah, like consumers that buy seafood, or restaurants that buy seafood, down in Latin America, Costa Rica specifically.
Latin America, and probably very much the same in the States, price drives the market.
Sure.
And so a guy walks through the door, wants to sell a snapper to a restaurant. First question is, what's the price?
Sure.
It's not, is it sustainable, and is it going to be here tomorrow?
Yeah.
I don't think the awareness of the average restaurant or the average consumers
is relevant.
Still price driven.
Yeah. Millennials, the big, 76 million consumer demographic, they tend to they want their product, they want to know where their products came from, they want to know if their products are sustainable and fall in line with best practices. But obviously, to your point, to some extent, it can still be a price-driven market.
And I was speaking of the Costa Rican fish market, but in the States, it's somewhat similar. But if you say the millennials are going to drive this again, if they become a strong consumer and have power behind them, they're the ones to make the changes.
To kind of initiate that and drive it.
All systems that exist, be it a milk distribution system or whatever you're talking about, I would imagine change is very hard to bring about because the people that are entrenched in that business don't want to see change. They're making money and things are good the way it is, and change sometimes
precludes somebody from making money. Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it has
change is hard to bring about in a conservative industry like fishing. It's very hard to bring about.
Sure. What have there been any major accomplishments or improvements in seafood harvesting in Costa Rica that you've seen over the past few years that you'd like to share that you think are relevant?
One important thing has been that they've made tuna seiners fish further out.
Okay.
They made seiners were catching small fish, and canned tuna is worth much less than a number 1 or a number 2+ tuna in the marketplace.
Okay.
And I think that's better. And there's a high bycatch rate on tuna seining. That could be one of the things. They've limited shrimping licenses, bottom trawling licenses in Costa Rica. That's probably a positive.
Okay.
They're implementing size catch rates. If we can enforce those rules, that's a positive.
Sure.
There's movement towards sustainability, definitely, and especially in Costa Rica because they want to have that appearance to the world for their tourism. Right?
Absolutely. Sure.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense.
Correct.
And do you see the Costa Rican government putting pressure on the surrounding neighboring governments to move their, processes further and, better sustainability?
Probably give lip service to it, but actual pressure, probably very little, I would say. Until there's some power from above, these institutions don't move. They like things status quo.
Slow to react then.
Correct.
Unless it's kind of staring them right in the face.
It's going to be consumer driven.
Yeah. So once the consumer base stops demanding those products, because if they're not following best practices, and those industries realize a downturn and their product either being sold or being allowed to be sold in certain countries, then do you feel that that's when those other countries will kind of wake up and enforce better practices within sustainability?
Correct, but you see Costa Rica being successful in tourism, and Nicaragua tries to copy and do similar things, but they don't do as good of a job, and so why would they follow in sustainability?
Sure.
Who knows? Time will tell.
Yeah, absolutely. So 37 years in the seafood business, you went to Costa Rica. Give us a little background of just how you started and what made you go to Costa Rica?
Well, for about 10 years I was a sailor, surfer, living on sailboats looking for surf, and I had a little sailboat, and I went to Costa Rica and ran out of money and made a little fishing boat and went fishing and made another boat, and pretty soon we started exporting fish and having more boats, and things kept going, and then about 8-9 years ago we decided to go into fish farming, and that's going quite well. Sure. We're doing the dotted spotted rose snapper, and finding a good market and going through the learning curve of being fish farmers now, which I believe is the true way to sustainability.
Sure.
And the markets we're selling to, they order 30,000 pounds, they get 30,000 pounds on exactly when they thought they were going to get it, and that's a hard one to follow for a wild fishery.
Absolutely.
I think sustainability through fish farming is a much easier road than would be through wild fishing.
Yeah.
From my seat where I'm sitting.
Sure, because you've got firsthand experience doing both.
Correct.
Over the years, so that's pretty cool. And it's
entirely, and they're entirely different businesses. You think they're both in the water, and you both have salt water, but they're entirely different. We can trace the egg to the plate.
Sure.
on the fish farming deal, whereas you have a fleet of small day boats, and they'll catch 15 to 20 pieces of mahi a day, and it's hard to trace that fish back to that boat, and full traceability from boat to plate.
Sure.
It's a difficult thing. Not counting, sometimes the guy will have a bad trip, and he'll pass some fish to another boat.
Sure.
It's caught by another boat. How do you control that? That's a very difficult thing.
Again, unless the benefit to compliance can be shown to the fishermen, that's one of the attributes that we've experienced at Blue Star. We're celebrating a year of our QR code enabled scan on demand verifiable transparency application. This isn't necessarily a plug for Blue Star, but it's relevant to the conversation. And so we have a vessel enabled with a GPS monitoring device that catches recorded electronically, and then all the details and all that data is downloaded and learned from and librated, and then it goes all the way from harvest to consumer scanning via QR code to track the product. And so it can work, but to your point from before, it was not an easy process to implement. It can be done, but it takes a little bit of time, and there's some pain points that are realized with it, and every fishery is different. We feel that to some extent we've cracked the code, so down the road we can hopefully implement this into other species in other areas of the world and that type of thing, to kind of move it forward and collaborate with other companies too.
Yeah, it's improving. The wild fisheries, the people are becoming more educated, and
sure.
and they're where most of the good quality fish will bring better income for them, and consumer-driven traceability will also bring more money into their bottom line.
Sure. we're realizing within the species of blue swimming crab, it's important that these changes happen for the longevity of the species itself. And the blue swimming crab species supports, communities in, Indonesia and the Philippines, and if the species goes, that industry goes for those people. And, there's been a lot of improvements to many of their lives as far as insurance and medical care and education and income coming in and that type of thing. So it's, it's important, and I'm sure it's the same thing in certain areas of Latin America too.
Sure.
Without that industry,
sure.
These people may not have any way to earn a wage or earn a living, that exists that exists without it. And if that resource goes away and if fishing boats go away, then what else? What are they going to do from there? So there's the aspect of that, the social aspect too.
Blue crab being in a limited area, it's a totally different subject when you have pelagic fisheries that swim from country to country and are captured by when they might be swimming by your country.
Sure.
It opens up a whole
different animal. Yeah, it's a little bit more challenging to kind of capture, similar to squid.
Exactly.
Squid moratoriums in India. Highly migratory species. Difficult to find and track, but again, maybe years down the road, or a few more years down the road, that we have the data, sets to learn from that and see, how it can be traced.
A lot has to be said of more science could be done. What is sustainable mahi catches? No one has nearly a clue of what that is, because you might think mahi's going away, but it might be a Nino year, and mahi catches drop, and everybody gets worried that the mahi's going away. 2 years later, you have more mahi
crop
than you've ever seen.
Yeah,
and it has nothing to do with what catch was taken.
Sure.
So it's a tough one.
Yeah, definitely. It's but again, everything's moving in the right direction. Could move in a better direction faster.
It is moving, though. It is moving. That's one good thing to say. It is moving.
Yeah, a lot of, a big driver for us to promote this podcast and put it out there and do it from the show is just to create better awareness for the consumers out there. And unfortunately, some, one species or one activity or one occurrence within seafood happens in a negative tone, and some consumers may not think that the seafood industry is cognizant of change needs to happen, and this is just a very good vehicle to share that with everybody, in a frictionless way. And we're not really plugging one company or the other. We're talking about attributes of your company, of Blue Star, of other companies that are out there, other NGOs, other FIPS, fishery improvement projects, just to let the basic consumer demographic and end user demographic know that this is on the forefront of the industry's minds, and change is happening, but change doesn't happen overnight, and it's a lengthy
You see
process.
it everywhere as you walk around the show here. Is sustainability and traceability is the key word.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in the seafood industry for 20 years, and when I got into it, sustainability was not on the forefront of all companies' minds. It wasn't really talked about the way it is today. It wasn't even remotely talked about the way it is today. Experience within clam harvesting, and because sea clam populations were declining 20 years ago, that was an issue, and boat bans and the like were put into place. That was my first exposure to sustainability, but it wasn't talked about the way it is today. It wasn't promoted like it was today.
Don't you think the biggest driver have been like MSC and ASC and BAP and these certification groups? They're really at the forefront of the push on these things. Monterey Bay Aquarium, all these people.
I think collectively, I think all of them have. I think all of the non-governmental groups collectively have all had a hand in pushing the message forward. If we look back as to one of the first states to really push sustainability would probably be Alaska. We had Susan from ASME on earlier, Alaskan Seafood Marketing Institute, and I remember 20 years ago when I first got into the seafood industry, Alaskan seafood was promoted, and sustainability with Alaskan seafood and best practices within, fishermen in Alaska, that was all promoted. That was from my experience, that was the first one that I saw. And then obviously NFI and a lot of the other organizations that have come up over the years, they've all done a fantastic job in their own right, in their own way of presenting that message. It's a great point to bring up. Anything you'd like to see down the road, within seafood and sustainability? If you had your wish list.
I think there's a lot of wish lists, but I think as far as like our FIP, I think the load has to be carried. If the consumer is going to want this sustainability and traceability, sure, he has to carry part of the burden. It can't be put all on the producer, because in the end, it's going to favor the consumer by far in
sure,
the market chain, and they should. Being from my point of view where we are, there's not a whole lot of government help or financial help from the fishing side, and we have a group of companies that are helping us do our FIPs, and I think that could be a trend in the future where the whole industry bears some of the brunt, because it all goes back to if you have ASC or MSC, sure, are you going to get more money for your product by jumping through those hoops, yeah, or aren't you? Are you going to be helped to get that certification, or do you just have to bear the brunt of the cost on your own and then still get the same amount for your fish? Yeah. That's what's going to make it work. If it's viable economically to do it, sure, it'll work. If it's not viable economically, then it's not going to go very fast.
Yeah. To your point, that's a great thing to bring up, and great wish list item to put on there. But very relevant, and the cost has to be shared, and the industry has to be it has to be a viable practice for the industry to sustain itself and still make money. As a company.
I won't mention who, but there'd be certain supermarket chains that market sustainability and traceability but they're also known in the industry as taking the highest markups and not helping you get those certificates.
Right.
So that's not fair.
No,
that's not fair.
Not at all. And they can remain nameless, but again, everything needs to change, but in time too. But the mindset is that those players in the industry will vet themselves out as better awareness is created and better verifiable traceability initiatives, sustainability initiatives, kind of present themselves in the industry and kind of flush everything out. It may take a few years, but it will happen over time.
I think if these market chains that we're doing and not helping in these certifications, that could be part of their promo, saying we are actively promoting sustainability and contributing to these certifications of certain industries that need help.
Absolutely.
That would improve their sales, if anything. I would think.
Yeah, you would think, right?
Yeah.
Bob, thank you so much for appearing.
Welcome.
It's been great having you. 37 years in Costa Rica, fishing with a surfboard sailboat. Really cool story. Always enjoy talking to you. You always have something great to add to a conversation.
Thanks
again.
Thanks. Let's see where it leads.
There you go. Max Christensen with Blue Star Foods. Bob Miles, Martec Industries. Thank you so much.